I saw Youth Councilor Calderon join, and then it looked like he exited quickly. I don't know if he was having a technology problem, but I think we'll wait just a moment for him to try to get back in. Or maybe, Mike, I don't know if you can outreach to him and find out if there's a problem or something. Oh, no, he's back in, it looks like. Okay. All right, I will call this study session to order. Recorder Krager, do you need to call roll for the study session?
I can see all the participants, so I'm just going to, I've already taken roll. But in the business meeting, I want you to call or to do an official roll.
Okay. All right, so study session. Item we have is to discuss solid waste management service level changes. Mr. Goodrich.
I believe you're muted.
About that, there you go. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start over. John Goodrich, Executive Manager, Public Works. And with me tonight is Chris Bell. Chris is our financial consultant for solid waste. Chris and I have been in front of council several times over the last several years. And tonight, we wanted to talk a little bit about service levels for solid waste. Mr. Mayor, if you remember back in October, November, we were receiving some customer inquiries having to do with increasing service levels, having to do with yard debris recycling, the recycling totes. Currently, the service level is every other week. The customers that we had that were inquiring had talked to the haulers and had been advised that they could double up on the amount of material that was being picked up, but that they would have to actually pay for an extra tote and then every 2 weeks put out those 2 totes or several totes or whatever at the extra cost to increase the level of service. We provided letters back to those customers, but also had initiated a engaged Tigard survey to get some idea as we went along into the month of November and December. We were receiving several other comments having to do with this issue and felt that perhaps getting the pulse of the community might be important. So we used an engaged Tigard survey with several questions asking about whether there was a willingness, whether they felt, whether our citizens felt that moving to every week collection for yard recycling was something that they were willing to participate in and also to pay for, because obviously there would be an additional cost. From that survey, there was a decision that because the survey provided favorable information from the citizens, that we go ahead and move forward with the cost of service analysis and ask Chris to take a look at that. So tonight, Chris has some information having to do with this particular topic on cost of service on several different types of issues having to do with solid waste, yard recycling, composting, which is also another type of service that perhaps the community would support. And what we're looking for tonight from council is just feedback and guidance on how to move forward both with our haulers and with the community as we move forward in whether we provide these additional services or not. And with that, I just go ahead and hand it over to Chris for his slide presentation.
Okay, hopefully everyone can see this.
We can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, John. And putting this information together, I worked with both haulers. I worked with Eric from Pride, and I worked with Mike Jeffries over at Waste Management to put together these numbers to bring you this information tonight. Now, if I can get this thing to, okay. So what I want to discuss with you is the introduction of where you're at in the current system, and looking at the possible changes or the probable changes, and show you the performance of the system over the last couple of years. Provide the alternatives and give you some input on each one of those alternatives, performance-wise and the cost-wise. And then after that, we'll, if you have any questions, we'll take those questions and hopefully answer them to the best of our ability. And if I can't answer them, I know that we have both representatives from the haulers here, and if I can't answer them, I know that surely one of those or either both of them can answer those questions. So, as you well know, you have two companies who collect solid waste and recycling within the city of Tigard. Waste Management, which in this map is in the green area on the north part of the city, and Pride Disposal, which is the south part of the city. Pride Disposal has the majority of the residential customers within the city of Tigard, just under 11,000 customers, whereas Waste Management has just about 3,700. These numbers are from last year, the weekly carts. They've changed a little bit. There's been some infill within the city, but the numbers are pretty close to what they were last year. Over the last 3 years, the level of service that the citizens enjoy are weekly garbage collection, weekly commingled recycling, and every other week yard debris. And last year was a kind of an anomaly, and maybe it'll flow into 2021. But with the statewide restrictions and everything, a lot more material was collected from the residential customers than in the past. However, over the last 3 years, the level of diversion has been pretty consistent, but it has been going up from 23% to 26%, with the total tonnage amount, again, just directly related to the number of customers. Right now, the yard debris program diverts approximately 24% of the collected tons from the city of Tigard. The cost and performance of what you're currently receiving right now, again, last year was an anomaly for two reasons, especially on the yard debris collection side. There was a lot of people home, and when you got people locked up at home, one of the things they do is turn to the yard and make the yard a little bit more beautiful. And in this case, when they do that, they generated more material. But last year was also a wet year too, and we usually see these trends from every 3 to 5 years. There's a year or 2 years within a block of years where there's more material that's generated. However, over the last 3 years, the average has been about 723 pounds of yard debris per customer per year. And over the last 3 years, that collection cost, the cost of collecting material, has slightly increased. And those increases are primarily due to a couple things. Number one, that there is a cost associated with collection. There are regular labor adjustments for the Teamsters. Both companies utilize union labor for their collection operations. Disposal costs has been moving up just a little bit. And last year was a little bit higher just because of the volume of the collected material. The service, the cost, if you looked at your overall rate, was $6.44 to collect the material. And the rate is simply that $6.44. And there's a margin and a franchise fee that's associated with that cost. So last year, in 2020, if you were to set a rate for the current level of service provided by the haulers, it'd be $7.58 per customer per month for yard debris collection. Now, there's a couple alternatives that we're looking at. The first one is to increase yard debris collection service from every other week to weekly. And to do that, both haulers would have to purchase another or 2 trucks, depending on the customer size. And right now, one of the issues that we've had, and actually it's gone back a couple years, but this year has been a little bit different, is the lead time for a collection truck is usually 6 to 12 months, sometimes even longer. So if there was a decision made by city council to move to weekly collection of yard debris, it would be, the haulers could implement that, but in order to have the new trucks and the new equipment on the street, it could be anywhere from the next year to the spring to maybe even later in the summer till they get those new trucks to accommodate that. In the meantime, they could utilize support trucks or backup trucks. To move from every other week collection to weekly collection right now, just to increase that collection frequency, the cost would be $2.53 per customer per month to move to continue to collect yard debris as it is. The next alternative is to introduce food waste into the yard debris, which is otherwise known as residential organic collection. And once you add food waste to the yard debris mix, per DEQ regulations, the steps that the composters and the processors have to do becomes a lot more rigorous, and the testing, which is why there's a difference in the increase or the difference in the cost between composting yard debris and composting yard debris with food. And in order to add food waste to the mix, to the residential mix, the cost would be approximately $100,900 for both haulers, for the composite combined, which is an increase of about 75 cents per customer per month to introduce food waste into the yard debris waste stream. Now, one of the issues that you also have to consider is when you do that, the amount of food waste that's currently that would be in the system is a relatively small amount. And the studies that I was able to get where they have looked at how much food waste is in the mix is showing that it's anywhere from 3 to 4%. It's not a significant amount. The specific study that I have was from the city of Olympia. And they found that 2.87% of the total collected yard debris and food waste was food within the yard debris mix. And so applying that 2.87% diversion number to the mix in Tigard, you would see approximately 158 tons of additional material in the waste stream with the introduction of food waste. So in order to add that food waste, the weekly cost would increase. Instead of $2.53, it would go up 75 cents to $3.28 per customer per month to add food waste to the yard debris material stream. And this is the study that was completed by the city of Olympia. And interestingly enough, you would think that city of Olympia and the city of Portland share something in common, and that is they collect garbage every other week. So there is a little bit heavier incentive for residents to pull food out of the garbage and put it into the organic stream. But even with that incentive, the amount that was being diverted in Olympia was a relatively small amount. The third alternative would be to switch the material streams and to go to weekly yard debris collection and every other week recycling collection. And switching that collection frequency, there would be an increase, but it wouldn't be as significant as the earlier one where we would go from weekly material collection of each material stream. So the increase for residential organics would be $1.30 per customer per month. And if we added the organics to that material stream, it increased to $2.05 per customer per month. Now, the issue at hand is that the city would have to get approval from Metro to make this change to the recycling program. However, the cities of Sherwood, Hillsborough, unincorporated Washington County are a few within Washington County area that currently have every other week collection of commingled recycling. So it's not as if it's a foreign concept. most of the, or there's several cities within Washington County that have this particular program of every other week collection of recyclable materials. Alternative 4 is to increase glass collection frequency to every other week. Currently, it's collected monthly. So in order to collect it every other week to increase that collection frequency, the estimated cost to do that, to make that switch, is 72 cents per customer per month. So those are the 4 alternatives. Are there any questions from council?
Well, can we just get a little bit of a briefing of what kind of public input we got in the engage process, Mr. Goodrich, before we start? I mean, I'd like that to help inform the council's questions. And yeah.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. So for that Engage Tiger, for the survey, we had 962 people that actually visited the site. We had 731 people who downloaded the document or visited multiple pages. And then we had actually 663 people that participated in the survey and answered at least a few questions. The type of questions that we asked were, so do you support switching from every other week to weekly yard debris pickup? And out of that, I think 69% of the respondents were positive for that and felt that that they would support increasing the service level. And then we asked, would
John,
you be willing to pay between?
Hold on, before we go on from that, was that tied with a cost increase, or was the question just, would you like this service?
So the questions were broken out into specific questions so that the respondents would just be answering that one question. And so the question was, would you be willing, would you support switching from every other week to weekly yard debris? And out of that, we got a very strong positive response that from the community saying yes. We then asked, we had to make some back of the napkin calculations and basically said, we believe that this is going to cost between $2 to $3 per month additional in order to provide this service. Would you be willing to pay $2 or $3 more for that service? And out of that, we had 64% respondents that said yes, that they would support that as well. And then we asked, and would you support if you could add compost to your weekly yard debris? Would you support that? And out of that, we had again positive. Let's see here. So we had 62% for question number 2 that were yes, and then for number 3, we had 62% as well. So 62% also said that they would support for that $2 to $3 per month extra if they could compost as well, and felt that was they were favorable to that. And then question number 4 was, would you be willing to support composting service if it was included in the higher fees for weekly yard debris? 58% supported that, and 42% did not support it. And then we did have a question 5 that was kind of an open question. Do you have any additional input for the project team? And I think these comments are probably important for council. So general support for providing weekly pickup of yard debris and compost, as well as combining yard debris and compostable waste in one bin. We had 74 people answer yes, that they support. That was their comment. We had 34 people that basically asked that we develop a system for yard debris and compostable waste pickup that adapts based on seasonal needs. So we have customers who would like to have it more seasonal, that it would happen at certain times of the year, perhaps when they need more yard debris pickup, but not when there isn't a need for yard debris pickup. And of course, one of the problems for the haulers for that, even though we didn't specifically ask that question, from the public standpoint, they don't understand that the labor and equipment costs, all of those fixed costs of providing that service need to be spread out over a 12-month period, and it's difficult to have those costs involved and then have that equipment sit idle or not being used during the off season. And then 18 customers basically said, do not change anything, that they're happy with the service and that they would support everything just staying the way it is. So I mean, at the staff level, we feel that the survey provided a favorable response, and that was one of the reasons why we moved forward with cost of service analysis, because we wanted to ensure that the information that we had, the back of the napkin calculation, we wanted to have something more in depth that Chris was able to put together for us, as well as working with the haulers to ensure that those cost structures, that their chief financial officers agreed that cost basis would be valid.
Council President Lube, I think you might have gotten your question answered, but I want to double check that you did. Okay. Who's got other questions on the council? And then I'm going to give the haulers a heads up that if they want to speak and give their brief input, we'll allow that too. But Councillor Newton, go ahead first.
Yeah, just two really quick questions. I'm always sensitive to this because I'm single and I don't use a lot of garbage, but it's important to families. So two questions. Was there anything in the survey about glass? That's one of the alternatives. Did you ask the community about making that change? And then I have one more question.
Councilor Newton, that's an excellent question. The answer to that is no, we did not ask about glass. Glass was a topic that had come up from the haulers as we were putting together after we had done the survey and had the questions, we were getting some information from the haulers who were basically asking about, well, you know, glass pickup is once a month, and perhaps glass being at the same time as the commingle might make more sense. And so that's why we went ahead, since we had Chris on board already, it just made sense for us to go ahead and add that as a task for him to answer that question.
Okay, thanks. And my last question is would there be an option or an opportunity for folks to downsize their bin size when they don't need as much? I mean, I do a lot with inserts and smaller bins, so that still means the pickup would occur, but would there be a way for people to modify seasonally on their own using smaller bins or bin inserts or something? I'd be interested in knowing if that's a possibility.
I might let the haulers weigh in on that, but at the staff level, I would say that the difficulty is the equipment and machinery is designed for the totes that are being used. Adding food scrap to the yard debris doesn't really cause any issues with the size of the tote or the type of equipment that picks that tote up and then deposit into the truck for hauling. But again, I think that perhaps Dean or Cindy might be able to answer that question better.
Councillor Newton, what you're getting at is just having a smaller size that you can put in.
Yeah, and I have an insert in my garbage, that I don't fit. I only fill half of a can, so there's an insert in there so it doesn't fill up. It only fills half of the tote or can or whatever you want to call it. So that's what I was thinking about. It's the same tote or can, whatever we call it, but it's got an insert in it because I don't need as much. I don't use as much.
You're charged less for that.
Correct. Yeah, and so could customers, they'd need to think about that, but maybe there'd be an option for customers to manage that is what I'm wondering. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Haulers, when we go to you, can you be prepared to answer that question? If you have any input, I'm gonna still continue with the council, but please write that down and be prepared. Councillor Shaw. You are still muted, unfortunately.
I failed to hit that button. Thank you, Mayor. I think after this many months, I'd learn that quickly. I'm interested in the lead time that was mentioned that'd be needed for either extra truck and extra personnel. And if that is indeed, do they have backup trucks? So this service, if we were to move forward, could even commence. And then also, perhaps the haulers could also address that if they were going to be purchasing additional garbage trucks or an additional garbage truck, would they consider it being electric? Thank you.
All right, Council President Lube.
Yeah, I guess my question is, right now there's an option if you wanted an additional yard debris tote, say, for the busy season for you, which would be spring and summer, you could do that as an additional cost. And I'm curious how many of our residents actually take advantage of that during the busier season to have 2 totes and then go back down to 1, or is there like a commitment to do that for a year at a time? That's my question.
At the staff level, I can answer that. There's a 12-month commitment. Again, for the haulers, it's difficult to deliver a tote and then only have a short service period, and then have to recover that tote again. And so they've asked customers that it's a 12-month commitment.
Gotcha. And I just want to go ahead and add a quick shout out to Pride for the option of getting new totes every year. If you don't know this, you can reach out to them and they will get you a fresh and clean tote. And it was a lovely surprise this year. So thank you for that, Pride.
Mr. Goodrich, on Council President Lube's question, can you also indicate how much it costs per month for someone to just get a second tote? You might have covered that, but I want to make sure that's clear in people's minds to get a second yard debris tote.
Mr. Mayor, no, I did not provide that information. I believe it's $4.48 a month additional. And the haulers can correct me. I don't have the information directly in front of me, but I have had several conversations with many customers having to do with that topic.
Okay. Let's see. We've got someone from Pride. It's is it Cindy?
No.
It's Kristen. Cindy is also on the call, but.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Kristen. I was going to call out for you, but I did not. Maybe I missed you on the participant list. But go ahead.
No problem. Yeah. So I'll try to cover the questions that have been asked, but feel free to touch base on anything I don't cover. To answer Councilor Lube's question, last I pulled a report when John and I were discussing this a few months ago. For us, about a little less than 8% of our customers in Tigard currently take advantage of the second yard debris cart. And that can, even though there's a yearly commitment, it can still fluctuate slightly because some people might get them in March and then they keep them for 18 months and then have them pulled. But it is about 8%. To answer Councillor Shaw's questions about trucks, we do have spare trucks that we're currently planning on phasing out, but we would essentially keep those a little bit longer if this program were to go into effect. So we would have time to get the trucks in. As Chris mentioned, there's some lead time on that. In terms of electric trucks, we are currently in the process of converting our fleets to compressed natural gas, and we use renewable natural gas in our vehicles, and we are definitely interested in electric trucks. Personally, I think from my understanding of the technology, it's still a little bit too early for that. In terms of being able to see a sample truck, test it, things like that. I think it might be a couple of years before the technology may be ready because there's concern about being able to handle large weights that we carry on our trucks efficiently with those electric engines is my general understanding on that. And I think I covered that. Oh, and the yard debris can size, the other our perspective on that is similar to John's comments on the trucks being idle. If there's a potential seasonal aspect, we have some similar concerns about seasonal aspect of different size of carts. We'd have to carry extra inventory for a certain type of the year versus another part of the year. And traditionally throughout the region for recycling and yard debris, the carts typically are only offered in one size. And the costs are structured in a way that takes into account that customers don't put out a full yard debris cart every other week option that they have available to them. It's averaged based on the average number of set outs, both from a production as well as the weight in the cans that we're paying for processing of. So I think those are the answers to all of the questions from Pride's perspective.
Kristen, can you just comment on I'm a little, I don't know, I usually consider labor not exactly a fixed cost, and maybe it's not exactly a variable cost too. It's maybe somewhere in between. But can you comment on the statement made that labor in the analysis is basically a fixed cost? Do you view it that way? Is that how it is practically for your operations? Like if you were told we want this every week for 6 months of the year, I certainly know the truck is, I can give that the truck is relatively fixed costs because most of the cost of it is in the capital purchase and not necessarily in the per mile operations. But I have a little more trouble with labor on that. Can you make a comment about that?
Yeah, the main issue there is that it's difficult to find and hire people that are qualified to do the work, that have commercial driver's licenses, that can be trained to use our equipment, use our onboard computers, learn the way that we do things. And so it's a fixed cost in terms of we can't realistically lay a few people off during the times of the year that we may not need them because the service changes frequency. And so when you introduce inconsistencies into the collection system throughout the year, it's harder to staff. So then we have to balance whether we're going to keep that person on staff and try and find something else for them to do versus potentially lay them off and then try to rehire when the service changes back from every other week to weekly. So
this is not the kind of thing that, could be like the summer beer truck job that some of my PE teachers had or something, right? Like it just doesn't play out that way.
It used to be when recycling was manual collection. We actually did have college students that would help in the summertime to basically shag. They wouldn't have to drive the trucks. They would be kind of the helpers. But now that we don't have those kinds of positions available, it's really hard to get seasonal help.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to responses from Waste Management. Is Dean here or someone else?
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Well, good evening. My name's Dean Camphor. I do municipal marketing for Waste Management, our Oregon operations. I wanted to go back to the original theme of your questioning about frequency of collection of yard debris and recycling. Frequency of collection always increases higher diversion. But I wouldn't give up the frequency of weekly recycling for weekly yard debris. There's much bigger environmental benefits as well as greenhouse gas benefits by diverting hard recycling items that you put in the cart versus diverting more yard debris. So I would promote weekly of both of them, but I wouldn't give up the weekly of the hard recycling for the yard debris. I also agree with Chris's comment about the food waste. Our experience in food waste programs is typically it's 3 to 5% diversion. So you don't get a lot of diversion, but any diversion of this is great to reduce the production of methane gas at landfills, but those landfills do have gas collection systems as well. So cart size, you asked about variable yard debris cart size. Typically we do variable cart sizes for the garbage to promote recycling and diversion, but typically for the recycling and the yard debris, we like to standardize those carts to one size. So we're not chasing carts throughout the year. You asked about electric. That's a very good question. Electric is a cutting edge coming, but for our industry, it's not really perfected at this time. It's definitely perfected for car, transportation of individuals, and you were seeing it into the buses, but it's not perfected at our size trucks at this point. And I should mention that Waste Management about 5 years ago made a commitment to convert our fleets to renewable natural gas. And in Portland and our Washington County operations, we have over 150 trucks on the road servicing our customers every day. And I think we have the largest fleet in Oregon, as a matter of fact. So like Pride, we've made that investment. Those trucks aren't fully depreciated. It would be a little foolish to convert that fleet over at this point in time. But maybe when electric vehicles are more perfected for our industry, the battery, the recharging of those batteries is perfected, it might be a good transition sometime down the road.
So Dean, I think either you or Kristen could answer this, but what is a fully loaded, typical fully loaded garbage truck weigh once it's ready to head out and make a dump?
Yeah, it's going to be 50, 60,000 pounds, about 30 to 40 tons. But also you asked about the variable collection or turning programs on and off, and drivers. Yeah, those programs really do not work real well for our industry, because what do you do with the truck? What do you do with the driver? These are professional drivers. These drivers work very hard at what they do, and it's really tough to find CDL drivers that have a clean driving record, can be insured, and also free of other, they have to pass a drug test that we do periodically as well. So yeah, there's a shortage of CDL drivers, and long haul CDL driving is much easier than what our drivers are doing, collecting garbage and recycling and yard debris. But hopefully that answered most of your questions.
Thank you, Dean. Are there any follow-up questions for either of the haulers? Councillor Newton.
Yeah, I think this is for Mr. Goodrich. When we did the survey, did we indicate backing off of a commingling to every other week? Because isn't that what we're talking about doing? Did we ask folks about that, about that trade-off?
Councillor Newton, we did not, and the reason for that was that because of Metro's requirement, once we're already doing what we're doing, it's very difficult to go back and have Metro allow us to do it different. And I think it's actually written in their standards. So no, we didn't ask that. We did have some customers that said, oh, we'd like yard debris pickup every week, and we'd like the commingle pickup every other week. But they didn't have an understanding of the Metro requirements.
All right. So, Mr. Goodrich, are you hoping to get? I'm assuming you want some sort of council direction on where we're headed tonight. Is that what you're aiming for?
Well, from staff's perspective, what we would like to do is we now have a cost of service analysis that tells us fairly closely what the actual cost would be. We would like to go back to the community with a engaged Tigard survey, asking perhaps more difficult questions or more pointed questions as such. If there's desire, so again, once the community provides us feedback based on the newest information, then perhaps we would be coming back to council, sharing that information, and then trying to see if there was support in making any type of change. I'm not sure that the change would occur by January 1 of 2022. That is when the next scheduled rate increase is programmed in for solid waste. But as you can see, there's a long lead time. I think not only are we going to need to provide the haulers with some time to get ready to do something as bold as this, but also I think we need some community engagement as far as communications and ensuring that the public understands how the system works, what the benefits are, and such. So over the next 3 to 6 months, I imagine the department will continue to gather information and come back to council with perhaps a stronger recommendation as far as what those next steps are with specific deadlines or dates as such. There are many possibilities here. You could switch to every week or yard recycle tote collection, and 6 months later roll out composting. I mean, so it can, there's some flexibility. I think the glass issue is another one that we add to the engaged Tigard and just, again, get a pulse of the community to see if there's a willingness that they have a need for the service and the benefits of it, and whether they're willing to pay the additional cost for that service. Does that seem like a reasonable approach to council?
It does to me, John, and we'll get the rest of the council to weigh in a moment. I think the fact that we had 600 plus people like engage in a two-way interaction in last time around is fabulous, and I'd love to see that much engagement. In fact, it makes me more confident in the decisions that we're potentially going to make. I would caution you against having the survey get too complicated. So I think there may be some key questions that need to be asked, but I would not ask more than 5 questions. That would be if we want to have. I think there's a direct relationship between how many questions you ask and how much engagement you get. So if we want to ensure we only get 100 responses, making it 20 questions long will probably ensure that. So I would try to keep it simple and just get the absolute key information that we think we need for the council to make the right decisions.
Okay, it's very difficult to find a balance for the community because everybody is individuals, even though they might be in single family residential. They all have different size families, different needs, etc. And so what we're trying to do is create a system of solid waste management that meets the needs of the whole community. But again, this was pointed out to us by citizens who had taken the time to contact us and inquire about why the service level was at where it was, or what would be necessary in order to increase that service level. So I'm very pleased with the engaged Tigard, and it was a really good survey and well participated.
We certainly want to meet all the community's needs. At the same time, this is probably an example of a time when we're going to meet 80% of people's needs really well, and people that need 12 yard debris bins are probably not going to be super pleased, and neither are people like Councillor Newton who make, a quarter the garbage that most people make. So, I guess I just want to lay out there for the council to think about that.
As a host, call in host.
That we're not going to meet every single person. I mean, we just can't. I don't think we can make decisions that way. Okay, Council President Lube, do you have any further comments, or can you support the plan?
I can support the plan, and I would also advocate for a short survey. I personally get to too many questions and give up.
Youth Councillor Calderon?
Yeah, I would support the survey. One thing I would add is make sure you use very basic language, because I was confused when I read residential organic collection. So if you could just explain that means compost and yard debris, that'd be fantastic. And I would like to say I had 5 questions prepared, and every single one of them was asked by someone else. But great questions. I was also very interested if it was seasonal work, because I'm applying for a summer job, but I guess it's different when you need a commercial driving license and you have to feed a family year round compared to me who just wants a summer job. But thanks for the presentation, guys.
I will even say that I'm not sure the word solid waste always means thing. I mean, that's a word, Mr. Goodrich, just so you know, that I think if you were to put that in front of a lot of people, you'd get a lot of different answers as to what that is, including me before I became a city councilor. All right, Councilor Newton, anything, or can you support the plan?
I support the survey. I think it should be short too, and I still call it garbage. Sorry, I still call it garbage.
Councilor Shaw.
I too support going out to the community now that we understand what the cost would be, sharing that in a survey that's understandable as well as short and sweet. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I think we've got council direction. Mr. Goodrich, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you and good evening.
All right. And thank you, Kristen and Dean, for participating today. That's great. Oh, Mr. Rager's raising his hand. Last minute curveball, Mr. Rager?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I didn't want this moment to go by without acknowledging John Goodrich. I don't know if you all know this, but he is retiring next week. And if you would have asked John and I back in 2005 when I first hired him, what his last action before the council would be, neither one of us would have guessed solid waste. But here we are, and I just want to say a few words just to acknowledge how wonderful it's been to work with John. We hired him in 2005 to be a water operations supervisor. Within a short amount of time, he became a manager in our department because we could quickly see John's value that he would bring to the organization. He eventually became manager over the 3 utilities that we have in the department. I could always count on John to follow through and to finish a project. And he's the kind of guy that always willing to help, always willing to jump in. Some of the things that he did early on was work with our water division to bring about some best management practices. We had a lot of different ideas in that group as to what we should be focusing on, and John led a really excellent process to get us to best management practices. He also helped the city during our bond rating process. Was that in 2010, John, when we did that?
2010.
Yeah. So that was huge for the city. He was part of that team, but he's done many things for the department and for the city, and just wanted to take this opportunity to thank John and wish him well.
So John, I was writing a thank you note to you today that you probably haven't gotten to see yet, but you know, the community should really know that one of the main reasons that water that is safe and healthy and drinkable appears in their tap when they turn it on is because of you. And I just want to thank you. And I put this in the card too, but thank you on behalf of all the residents of Tigard. I see Councilor Newton wants to speak as well, so we'll let her do that. And Mr. Rager, thank you for bringing this up. I wasn't sure if this was officially the last meeting, so I was a little reluctant to go there, but I appreciate you stepping in and allowing us this time. So Councilor Newton?
Yeah, I knew it was his last meeting, but you beat me to the punch, Mr. Rager. So I just want to tell folks one thing about John Goodrich. When we were considering moving to the Lake Oswego Water Partnership, everyone that wrote in that had a concern about how it would affect their rates, every single person got a personal email from John Goodrich where he evaluated their bill, made suggestions about how they could affect their bill, and people were just thrilled that he just took the time to respond. So that was such a great example of how to engage with our community that we got, maybe 5 people commenting when we raised the rates. So, you know, just a stellar example of how to engage with the community when you've got a difficult issue in front of you. And so I really enjoyed working with you on the water project, John, and thank you for that. I learned so much from you about how to engage with individuals, so thank you.
All right, anyone else want to say anything? Council President Lube.
I just want to thank John for his partnership. You know, as somebody who came in new and not really knowing what happened with our utilities, John took a lot of time to explain to me and take me, you know, to the water treatment facility and really show me everything. And that's the care that John takes and he took with the city of Tigard, to really make sure that we understood and, you know, all the cool things about the facility. I'm kind of a nerd that way. You know, I like learning about those things. And so it was just the kind of care that John has in everything that he does. And so I really appreciate your partnership and the time that you took to explain everything. And if you treat me that way, and, you know, as Councillor Newton said, you really treated our entire community that way. So thank you for your service.
Councillor Shaw.
I also want to thank John, except I did not get the tour, John. COVID interrupted that. So maybe we could take a rain
Sorry
check.
for that.
But I know, but you did an excellent job and bring me up to speed as a new counselor. So I very much appreciate that. And maybe we could take a rain check. Should your retirement plans be via the water treatment facility or that direction, I'd love to join you.
Well, I live very close to the plant. I can just walk over and show you. And who knows, maybe they'll even let me in. I don't know. So.
Great, I'll meet you there. I'm close too.
All right, so thank you, Mr. Goodrich. I do want to move us on. And staff, do we need to wait until 7:30 for the business meeting, or are we clear to start the business meeting?
No, you can start the business meeting.
All right. So I will officially call the City Council and Town Center Development Agency meeting to order. City Recorder Krager, please call roll. And Councillor Goodhouse is at a college graduation and will not be here tonight.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Youth Councillor Calderon.
Here.
Councillor Newton.
Here.
Council President Lube.
Here.
Councillor Shaw.
Here.
All right, I will ask Mr. Nollup to put the flag up on the screen and we will participate in the Pledge of Allegiance on your own. Please mute yourselves. No problem. All right, thank you, Mr. Nollup. I have a brief statement that I'm going to read tonight. It's 365 days have passed since George Floyd, an unarmed black man, died at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. Though only one of many such tragedies, the murder of George Floyd sparked grief and outrage throughout the Tigard community and the country, and inspired protests speaking to previous unheeded calls for change and safety for communities of color. Your calls for change have driven our response in Tigard. You asked that we empower community voices to review public safety practices. We responded by creating a public safety advisory board, a 16-member group of community members. I'm encouraged by the early work of the Public Safety Advisory Board. Just recently, their work led to the expansion of the Tigard Police's body camera program. I can assure you that they are 1, asking the right questions, 2, sharing the perspectives they are hearing in the community, and 3, providing critical input and feedback about our public safety practices. You also asked that we identify and address racism and bias in city operations. We acknowledge that systemic racism is ingrained in our organization, and we are actively working to disrupt the status quo by implementing the city's first anti-racism action plan. You asked that we create a long-lasting, meaningful change, and we agree that the city's actions must be sustainable. We seek to achieve this change by using an equity lens when evaluating and implementing all city initiatives, including the recently approved council goals. As a city, we also must acknowledge that we do not have all the answers. The Public Safety Advisory Board and the Anti-Racism Action Plan are just 2 components of how we will achieve our vision to be an equitable community that is walkable, healthy, and accessible for everyone. We will continue to lead while listening carefully to our community. Tonight, I'm challenging our community to speak up about the work that we're doing as a community and the work that still must be done to show Gianna Floyd that her father did in fact change the world, including the Tigard community. To the Tigard community, there are several ways to speak up. First, you can contact me via email at jason@tigard-or.gov or my cell phone number 503-810-0269, or to the entire city council by mailing to councilmail@tigard-or.gov. And with that, we will move on to Councilor Staff, any non-agenda items?
None from us, Mr. Mayor.
And I just knocked my mouse off the table, so give me a second here. Where did it go? Hold on. Okay, maybe I'll be mouseless for a moment. This may be more challenging. You'll see my finger in the screen a lot, probably. Okay, let's move on to public comment. Assistant City Manager Nyland, any follow-up to previous public comment?
Good evening, everyone. So last week you did not have a public meeting, so no comments were received. And your meeting before that on May 11th, no public comments were received. So my report is that I have no report.
All right, and I will report that I have my mouse back. Very important for the meeting.
It's a great evening.
Let's see, written public comment. City Recorder Krager, I believe we had 3 written public comments. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor, and you've got a copy of those.
Yep, so we had public testimony from Nate writing a concern about litter, excrement, drug paraphernalia spread by homeless people on the Fano Creek Trail and other walking paths. Debbie Sanchez proposed converting one of the tennis courts at Summer Lake Park into 2 pickleball courts. And then a letter from Housing Land Advocates and Fair Housing Council of Oregon. These were testimony in support of agenda item number 6 tonight. Want to make sure that everyone is aware of all 3 of those. So that is the public comment we had. Assistant City Manager Nyland, I trust those will be followed up on, correct, by staff?
Correct. And next
Okay.
week I'll give a follow-up update of what we've done.
Okay, thank you.
We've got it handled. Yep.
All right, let's see. Phone in public comment. Anyone that wants to make a public comment now can do so by calling 503-966-4101. Mr. Nolup, do we have any callers in the queue?
Mr. Mayor, at this time, there are no callers in the queue.
All right. Let's see, we'll move on to council liaison reports. Are there any board or committee liaison reports? And I will just give the council a heads up to try to be brief. I think we're at least 20 minutes behind at this point. Any reports? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand feature. I just wanted to comment really quickly on the Public Safety Advisory Board. We've had a couple of meetings since the last liaison report, and we had a really good discussion last night about the mental health response team that Washington County coordinates and some of the plans moving forward. So if people in the community haven't seen that meeting, I would suggest you watch it, or council members. It was really helpful, and maybe Youth Councilor Calderon could talk briefly too. It was really helpful to hear how those programs work and the difference between that and the Cahoots program. So I would recommend that folks take a look at that. That's all. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions on that? All right, we'll move on to item number 3, which is consider a resolution of appreciation for Tigard High School student envoy, Caroline Frisarius. So I think we need to act on this, but I also want to thank our envoy for her support this last year. Certainly been a most challenging and interesting and different year for everyone. And so we have a resolution, and before we act on it, I'll just briefly read it. It says, whereas the Tigard City Council desires to connect with students in schools to improve communications and relationships, and whereas the City of Tigard elected officials appreciated the monthly updates from student envoy Caroline Frisarius, and whereas activities coordinated by Caroline and her fellow student leaders benefited students and the Tigard community, and therefore we recognize her and the high school staff as well. And so is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 21-15.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 21-15, a resolution acknowledging and commending Caroline Frisarius for her service as Tigard High School student envoy to the City of Tigard.
And a roll call vote.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes.
And Councilor Goodhouse is absent. Councilor Newton.
Yes.
Council President Lube.
Yes.
Councilor Shaw.
Yes.
All right. Resolution 21-15 passes unanimously by those present tonight. We'll move on to item number 4, which is consider a resolution to approve appointing an alternate Tigard Transportation Advisory Committee member to voting member. Mr. Roth.
Good evening, Mayor Snyder and City Councilors. I'm Dave Roth. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner with the City of Tigard. Before you tonight, we have a resolution to consider for appointing Serge Killingsworth, who's currently a non-voting member of TTAC. We had a voting member resign, from her position because she took a new job in Toronto, Canada. So she left a couple of months ago, and as is the typical practice with this committee and some of the other committees is during a midterm appointment, we usually consider the most senior alternate member for appointment as a voting member. So we're looking for guidance from you if Serge should be appointed to a voting member.
I'll move to approve resolution number 21-16.
I'll second the motion.
Oh, sorry.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 21-16, a resolution appointing Serge Killingsworth to become a voting member of the Tigard Transportation Advisory Committee to complete the term vacated by Sarah Tharada.
And a roll call vote.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw.
Yes.
All right, resolution number 21-16 passes unanimously by those present. We'll move on to item number 5, which is consideration of filling a vacancy on the Public Safety Advisory Board. Management Analyst Ramos.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm back requesting your action on filling a vacancy for an alternate position on the Public Safety Advisory Board. The alternate vacated the spot due to the ongoing investigation of the officer-involved shooting. And we are bringing forth Mr. Nick Jarmer. He is one of the original 32 applicants to the Public Safety Advisory Board. He was in the top 16 finalists who received votes through the community caucus, and council discussed him as a potential appointee on during the original conversation that happened October last year. And then he was actually back in consideration in April. So here he is again for a third time, looking to get appointed as an alternate member.
Well, and as I recall, we kind of struggled as a council to make a selection. So this makes me feel good that we're putting someone that's very qualified in the role. So is there a motion?
I'll move to appoint Nick Jarmer to the Public Safety Advisory Board.
And I can second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? City Recorder, roll call vote.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw.
Yes.
All right, motion carries unanimously by those present. Thank you very much, and congratulations to Mr. Jarmer. Let's make sure he gets the usual Tigard welcome, or the virtual COVID Tigard welcome now, with a mailed city pin to his residence.
I'm glad you,
Go ahead, Mr.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Mayor. We had it on our checklist.
Thank you. It's become how we do things in COVID times, so thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is a legislative public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan to adopt housing needs analysis update. And I need to open the public hearing, which I'll do with my knuckles. And hearing procedures. Anyone that wishes to testify will be allowed to do so by phone. You may call to get in the queue by calling 503-966-4101. Again, 503-966-4101. And with that, we'll move on to the staff report. Senior Planner Warren.
Good evening, Mayor Snyder and members of the City Council. My name is Skylar Warren. I'm a senior planner in the Department of Community Development. And tonight we bring forward for your consideration an update to the city's housing needs analysis. The housing needs analysis was last updated in 2013 as part of periodic review, almost 8 years to the day from now. A housing needs analysis is an important component of the city's comprehensive plan. It is required by law and is the means by which the city demonstrates compliance with statewide Planning Goal 10 and related statewide housing statutes. At its most basic, the housing needs analysis provides a detailed look at the city's supply of buildable lands and its projected growth over the next 20 years. Any difference between those figures guides the city in understanding where it has a projected surplus or deficit of those lands. However, a housing needs analysis also includes a look at a number of other factors and contexts that shape our understanding of our community's housing needs. Notable among those are an examination of the city's supply of affordable housing, the balance between homes for rent or sale, and the needs of the population based on a demographic analysis and surveys. Finally, the housing needs analysis provides guidance in updating housing policy based on an understanding of all the foregoing. And it is important to note that any future applications for expansion of the urban growth boundary must be supported by a housing needs analysis completed within the last 6 years. In 2018, as part of HB 2003, House Bill 2003, the state regularized the schedule for housing needs analyses at 6 years for cities within the Metro UGB and expanded the number of factors that are examined as part of it, including a housing production strategy. While the city is not yet required to implement a housing production strategy due to the timing of this work, most of the elements that would be included in one are well covered in the associated housing market analysis in the city's affordable housing plan that was adopted in 2019. I want to acknowledge that this work was supported with a generous grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development under the provisions of HB 2001 and 2003. We appreciate their support and guidance in completing this project. And at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Melissa Mayu of Mosaic Planning, who has been our consultant assisting us with this project. Melissa.
Thanks, Skylar. And I have a quick presentation that I'll share. Let's see. I'm not sure that I'm able to share that.
I can share it. I've got it up here.
Handy.
Perhaps. Yeah, I have it pulled up, but I don't have the ability to, it's not showing that PowerPoint, I don't think. Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, this is weird because this is not even one that I have.
The technology gremlins.
There you go.
All right.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you tonight. As Skylar mentioned, the crux of the housing needs analysis is really looking at what type of housing exists in the city now, what type of housing will be needed into the future, specifically looking at about 20 years into the future, and what kind of policies and procedures can the city take to ensure that it will be able to meet its housing need over that time frame. Let's see, could we jump ahead a couple slides? I think to the third one. Yeah. So a big part of this study was community engagement, hearing from the public about what types of housing, what types of communities do they want to see in the city. We worked with a community advisory committee and had about 5 different meetings with them throughout the project, and also held a public survey and a focus group with folks who spoke Spanish. Let's see. I think we lost the PowerPoint. Okay, thanks.
Melissa, maybe you can continue some introductory comments and then.
Yeah, sure. I can talk through it. Yeah. Me. Oh, okay. Perfect. And if we could hop to the next slide. So looking at what types of housing does Tigard have now, the majority of the city is single family houses, about 60%. Those multifamily units make up about 25%, and row houses or townhouses about 8%. These shares are pretty similar to what we saw in Washington County and throughout the Portland metro. But you'll note that some of the forms of housing like cottage clusters, duplex, triplexes, quads are either pretty rare in Tigard or not really available at all. So one of the things that we kept in mind throughout this study was ways that the city may be able to encourage a greater variety of some of those middle housing types. Next slide, please. So from the data, we could see that both the for sale market and rental market here are pretty tight. The median home sale price was about $400,000, which is a little bit higher than both the county and metro area, with that price being heavily impacted by the size of the home, so larger homes costing more. Generally, the supply was pretty constrained and not a lot of vacancy. So if you are looking to buy a place in Tigard, it might be difficult to find something that's going to work for you. On the rental market, the average rent was about $1,300 a month. And you can see in that graph there how it has increased at a rate higher than inflation over the last 5 years or so. Rental market vacancy was also pretty low, not quite as much as in the for sale market, but still pretty tight. And I think part of what's driving those rental rates up. Next slide, please. From both the data and the survey and community advisory committee, we heard these general themes about what types of housing Tigard needs. Housing that is affordable for the range of incomes of households that live here. A variety of types, so not a focus necessarily on larger single family homes, but something that's going to work for a variety of household types, sizes, preferences, and needs. Housing that's connected to resources with walkability for folks to be able to access them. And housing that is equitable. So again, keeping in mind that there are going to be different needs for different groups here and making sure that they are able to access something that's affordable to them. Next slide, please. A quick overview of the survey results. So we could see that about 2/3 of the folks that participated in that survey thought that the city could use greater variety in terms of housing types and prices. And they felt that lack of affordable housing here is an important issue. Next slide. You can also see that from the survey, there was a preference for home ownership, which could be somewhat impacted by the fact that a lot of the folks who took the survey were homeowners, so they had a preference to continue owning their homes. But there was a greater preference than the share of homeowners that made up survey takers. So even amongst the renters, there was some desire to buy a home. Thinking of what types of features were desired, that was things like safe streets and sidewalks, a size of home that fit their needs, off-street parking, yards and natural features, things like that. And of course, price. Let's see, next slide, please. From the Community Advisory Committee, we heard a lot of the things that we saw in the survey. So they've noticed that new construction is often 4 or 5 bedroom homes, but really would like to see some mix of smaller homes built as well. There may be a need to look at some new models, so community land trusts or cooperatives, something that's going to work to keep housing affordable permanently. Access to green space and walkable communities are important, just like we heard in the survey. And folks noticed that there is opportunity for greater density, particularly in downtown and the Tigard Triangle. And again, I think the biggest theme that we heard from the advisory committee is that blurb in blue, that they want to see the city live up to its equity goals and achieve housing for all. And that this is not going to happen naturally in the housing market. There are going to be a need for policies that help to realize that vision. Next slide, please. From the data, we looked at what is the projected level of housing need over the next 20 years compared to housing capacity based on existing vacant and developable land that's zoned residential. So you can see there that within the city, based on household projections from Metro, there would be potential need for about 7,400 new housing units over the next 20 years. When you compare that to land availability in the city and development density based on what's happened over the last several years, you can see a housing unit capacity of about 4,200 units. So there is about a 3,200 unit gap there that would need to be accommodated. So possible responses could be encouraging greater infill housing. You can have more capacity if you're able to build more on that existing land than has been the trend over the past several years. So there's some opportunities there. I think particularly for focusing on some of those middle housing types that the city has recently allowed in various zoning districts. Another possible response is expanding the UGB to add land and increase housing capacity. Next slide. So then the second part of this analysis was really talking about what policies can the city enact to achieve its goals. A few of those, or excuse me, a big impact of what went into some of these housing policies and goals was interviews that we did with housing developers, including middle and affordable housing developers. Next slide, please. So from them, we heard that the city's development fee waivers have been a really positive step toward reducing fees for affordable housing. We definitely heard a lot of positive responses from the folks that we talked to as far as steps the city has taken for reducing fees. They talked about some potential opportunity to structure those fees so that they varied by housing type and size. So essentially, if you are going to be building a larger single family home, fees would be higher than for a smaller size unit. They also talked about possibilities of partnering with the county to help them reduce some of their fee waivers or encourage them to reduce some of their fees, not reduce their fee waivers. They also spoke about land availability as being a crucial factor for developing affordable housing. A lot of times for an affordable development, it takes longer to get all of the financing in place because it's coming from more and varied sources than a market rate development might. So in that case, it's harder to kind of jump on land as it becomes available. So to the extent that the city or nonprofit organizations could help with land banking or holding property for an affordable development, that's something that developers noted. They also talked a bit about incentive zoning or strong affordability goals in development areas. And thinking particularly about middle housing types, that was one thing we asked them particularly about. And we spoke with both Habitat for Humanity and Proud Ground, who often collaborate on affordable housing programs that are for sale housing, focused a lot on middle housing types. So duplexes, triplexes, quads, row houses. Those are the types of units that they build a lot and then sell to first-time home buyers at an affordable price. So I think there's a lot of potential there for both housing that's increases variety in terms of size, but price as well. For tax credit developers, they noted that 3 to 4 story apartments really work better with the tax credit program. So there's maybe less potential for middle housing types there. Next slide, please. Based on these inputs, the input from the public and data analysis, we came up with several housing strategies. So considering land banking to support affordable housing development, taking a community land trust model so that units that are affordable for sale housing would remain affordable, and targeting the use of affordable housing funds in key development areas or redevelopment areas in the city. Next slide, please. A few others, we talked about the possibility of zoning incentives or lending programs that would help affordable and middle housing developers who they may have kind of a gap in their financing, so providing a short-term loan to help them get their developments built. We talked about a strategy that based system development charges on home size, and the use of pre-permitted models, which is similar to a program that Portland used. So they had some tough to develop lots, and they asked architects to develop some models that there'll be a contest, and we'll pick 2 or 3 that the city will pre-permit, and if a developer wants to build that type of home, they can save some time and money in doing that. We also talked about the city doing some outreach to developers, particularly to attract desired housing types. So that might be cottage clusters, middle housing, affordable housing, and making sure that housing opportunities are affirmatively marketed in multiple languages, maybe through community organizations, so that folks who get information from a variety of ways, not just necessarily from the city, are going to be able to hear about what programs might be available to them. Next slide, please. So based on all this, we developed some amendments to the comprehensive plan housing component. And I think our key takeaways there were that there's a need for increased capacity to accommodate growth over the next 20 years. That housing affordability is a continued and growing concern. It's not something that's going to be fixed just with market rate development. That there's a need for a diverse housing mix that's going to meet residents' needs on price and preferences. And that there is a need for a proactive approach from the city to achieve these goals. Next slide, please. So throughout the comprehensive plan, you will see some changes to policies, to action measures that really relate to a lot of the strategies that we just talked about. So for example, land banking would fall under this policy that the city will continue to develop, dedicate, and administer funding resources to support affordable home ownership. And there's a specific action measure that would relate to that. So supporting affordable housing through land acquisition and development or participation in a land bank. Next slide, please. Just another example of kind of how the housing strategies connect to the comp plan. Looking at zoning incentives or lending programs for affordable and middle housing. That would fall under the city adopting and maintaining land use policies, codes, standards that provide opportunities to develop a variety of housing types. And you can see a few action measures that specifically relate to that. So providing incentives to encourage affordable middle housing types, providing incentives to encourage residential developers to incorporate affordable housing in their proposed developments. Next slide, please. Those were a couple examples, but certainly if you've taking a look through those amended recommended action measures, you can see how a lot of those other strategies are reflected there as well. And then last slide. So based on this, there's a staff recommendation to adopt the housing needs analysis and market analysis and adopt amendments to Goal 10 of the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, thanks.
And with that, we'll questions, I guess.
Yeah, so that concludes the staff report, Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Okay. So council, I want to direct you just to questions right now. If you have questions on the staff report. Councilor Newton.
I have one question. In the analysis for units that are available, and looking at the listing, you had single family and the different housing types. Were possible increases in units in Washington Square area, downtown, and the Triangle factored into that? I mean, that's an area where we could put a lot of units. I'm not going to say density necessarily, but that's factored in, I'm assuming. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that.
We did include potential for residential development in those areas based on the zoning type. So if it's mixed use zoning, we didn't assume that all of that would be residential. We took a portion of that, but the other residential zones, yes. So that analysis of capacity is really based on the DLCD requires now that it's based on past development trends. So it's based on the densities that the city has developed those different zones at over the past 6 or 7 years or so. So I think to your point, yes, if the city was to kind of make a concentrated effort to have more density in those areas, that could alleviate some of that need there.
Other questions? Okay, Mr. Warren, would you mind summarizing the written public comment that you received or that we received on this item?
Yes, we received comments between Planning Commission and tonight's hearing from Housing Land Advocates. They're a nonprofit group that supports housing initiatives and housing policies across the state, asking us to go into a little more depth with our findings related to statewide planning goal 10. We did that, and they provided testimony in commending us for that change and supporting the adoption of the housing needs analysis.
All right, thank you. Mr. Nolup, do we have any callers in the queue that wish to testify on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we do not have any callers in the queue at this time. I would like to just say that the presentation was not available on the live stream, but it was available on TBC TV's live broadcast and will be available from the city recorder's office if anyone would like to see that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Warren, do you have any further response to testimony?
No, I do not.
All right, I will close the public hearing. Council consideration of ordinance number 21-11. Is there discussion? Council President Lube.
Yeah, I just want to say that I found the amendments really interesting and fascinating in the presentation too, to read through about, you know, different things going on in our community. And one of the things that I found really interesting was that, you know, an estimated 9% of the population in Tigard lives under the poverty level. And according to the 5-year ACS data, And the poverty rate for Tigard households is higher than average among females in those 18 to 34. And I think, everything that we're going on with the pandemic has just raised higher awareness about our housing crisis and all of these issues. And that, there does feel like there is this huge divide where we have a lot of these, larger sort of homes and, watching the market. And I honestly don't know how people starting out, if they don't have some sort of family wealth or income that they can rely on, can start out buying a home. It's an insane market. I know me personally, if I hadn't sold my home in Texas, that was half the price for the home here in Oregon, I would have never been able to afford this home here. And so I really worry about how people are able to build wealth, our generation, like, our youth counselor, how is he going to start out and be able to build the sort of wealth that you can when you buy a home? It's not feasible in Tigard right now. And I find that very concerning for people who are starting out. So I found all of this really interesting. And I think this is really important to continue to move us in the direction to be a community for all, which means all income types, all family scenarios, and that everybody is welcome. So this is really important work that we're doing, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Council President Lube. Other council comments or questions or a motion? I want to say a few things before a motion, but anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Newton. I should find the raise hand feature. Anyway, I read everything that was submitted, and now this is my new thing to lose sleep over. I live in a modest home, a ranch home built in 1974. Someone in my neighborhood sold their home in 2 days for $70,000 over asking. I have a cute little house, but I'm sorry, the prices that people are getting. So when I was reading all of this, what I thought about was a focus in terms of how we spend our resources aimed more at 60% of median income, not 80, and that coupled with the mixed housing types, so the missing middle. So my view is we really need to focus on, I think, on that 60%, because we don't have unlimited resources, and a lot of these programs aimed at both missing middle and focusing on 60% of income, because I don't know that we're going to be able to robustly implement all of these recommendations. So I think the lens ought to be a lower income level and the mixed housing types. And I have 4 pages of comments, but I think we don't need to hear me talk as a former planner about housing types. So
are you intending to provide those to staff though, or have you already, Councilor?
Just some of the things that I think we could emphasize more than others to maybe get us started. I do think that lower income level is important, and I appreciate the staff's hard work on the missing middle, because I think that's critical too for people to have other options. So,
Councilor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and I really appreciate both Councilor Newton and Council President Lube's comments. I thought it was also very comprehensive. I also found it important that it addresses the needs of Tigard in all elements of housing. It sends a strong signal to both residents, but also to developers of what is coming down the pike. And if I did my math correctly, it looks like in about 2040, we could be about 65,000, of course, unless we're rocking as a city, so we might have a lot more people wanting to move in, but that is certainly needs that need to be addressed, and this comprehensive plan does that. So I just want to thank staff for all their hard work, or teammates for all their hard work, and very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Youth Councilor Calderon.
Yeah, just real quick, I was just going to say, just to echo what Councilor Lube said, I mean, I'm worried about how I'm going to build up wealth and hopefully buy a home someday. And then I know that a lot of the houses that are being built now are ridiculously huge. And I mean, I don't know if I would ever need a house that big. So it's good to know that there's a variety of house sizes. And the other thing I was going to say is that just a personal story is that my family's game when we go on family walks is to go up to the houses for sale and guess the price. And, you know, in the past like 4 or 5 years, as I've begun to understand house pricing, I now realize that those houses are very, very expensive and they only seem to go up. So it's very comforting to know that Tigard is trying to counteract that and make it more accessible to more people to buy houses. So thank you guys so much for all your work.
I just want to comment on the suggestion or the point that was brought up about county taxes and fees, or I mean really SDC type fees. I guess one of them is technically called a tax, but I think it's really essentially an SDC. Are we, and I guess I want to ask staff, is there any, I know I talked to Chair Harrington about this once, maybe 18 months ago or more, but is there any further discussion or action with the county around doing similar things to what we've been doing for affordable housing with those county fees that we really can't control?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a great question. Through my participation in the Coalition of Housing Advocates, I'm in touch with staff at other cities as well as our nonprofit affordable housing developers. And I would say that there is a desire among each of those two groups to see some sort of action taken on that front. It has not, I don't think, been a priority in the past as part of the work program for the county. I believe last year, Mr. Mayor, you submitted a comment on the county's work plan requesting that they actually add consideration of TDT reduction to their work program, and I believe that was declined. It was not on their work program again this year. And I don't know that there's, I don't know that whether the question is a desire among county staff or is it a question among policymakers. I don't have that window into it, but there's no action to my knowledge being taken right now to kind of look at that. Tualatin Hills Parks and Recreation District has recently changed their fees to be tiered to reduce the fees for smaller housing, and I believe to also waive some of those fees for affordable housing. But of course, that's not the county, they're their own taxing district.
So I can keep pushing them on that. At least try. I'll keep bringing it up till I'm out of office or they do something about it. Okay. Is there further question or a motion?
I have a motion. I think I wrote down correctly, Mayor. I could try. Oh, looks like Councilor Newton has a question first.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. One more question about the memo we got, the amended findings, and this might be for the city attorney. On the second page, there's a list of some key findings of the housing needs analysis. So is it typical when you're doing findings to include examples of key findings instead of just leaving that out and just it just seemed confusing to me. We're not listing everything. We're just listing some key findings. So if you could address that, I'd appreciate it, because I think this is what we'd be adopting, correct?
Yeah, so I'll actually defer back to Mr. Warren. He wrote the findings.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Newton. That's a great question. The request for some key findings was actually one of the requests made by Housing Land Advocates and the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. And they were basing it on other actions that had been taken by other cities in adopting their housing needs analyses. I agree that it's not typical, but it also, I don't think, runs afoul of any sort of process or procedure related to making those findings, and wouldn't necessarily open us to any sort of risk that I'm aware of. But I would defer again back to City Attorney Ralla for clarification on that.
And I concur with Mr. Warren.
All right, is there a motion?
Yes, I move to approve ordinance number 2111 with the addition to Exhibit C of a memo modifying findings.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? City Recorder, please read the number and title of the ordinance.
Ordinance number 21-11, an ordinance adopting comprehensive plan amendment, CPA 2021-00002, to adopt the 2021 Tigard Housing Needs Analysis as an ancillary document to the Tigard Comprehensive Plan Goal 10, Housing, and to amend Tigard Comprehensive Plan Goal 10, Housing.
As amended, correct?
As amended, yes.
And a roll call vote, please, City Recorder.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw.
Yes.
All right, ordinance number 21-11 is adopted unanimously with those present. We'll move on to item number 7, which will cause us to convene as the Town Center Development Agency for the next item. This is a public hearing to consider resolution approving the Town Center Development Agency fourth quarter budget supplemental. Let's see, Senior Management Analyst Kang and Finance and IT Director LaFrance, staff report, please.
Good evening, TCDA Chair and board members. My name is Steve Kang, a Senior Management Analyst from Finance and Information Services. I'm here tonight.
Steve, can I stop you just for a second? Because I'm noticing that we don't have any meeting procedures here for the public hearing. City Recorder Krager or City Attorney Rahala, do we need more specific hearing procedures or anything that we don't have in the meeting guide?
You can announce that anyone may give testimony. And,
all right.
And then staff will respond to any testimony.
All right, and I probably need to formally open the public hearing then as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, we're opening the public hearing. Anyone that wishes to testify will be permitted to do so, and you can do that by calling 503-966-4101. Mr. Kang, staff report. Sorry for the disruption, but I realized we were in a public hearing, but we hadn't actually initiated one. Sorry.
Thank you. Again, my name is Steve Kang, a Senior Management Analyst from Finance and Information Services, and I'm here tonight to present the fiscal year 2021 fourth quarter supplemental budget for TCDA. TCDA has one request, and it is to add debt service payment for the payment scheduled in fiscal year 2021. To give you a brief background, TCDA debt offering in 2019 was divided into 2019A, which was tax exempt, and 2019B, which is federally taxable. So at the time of budgeting, payment for the 2019A was budgeted, but not for the 2019B. So this request will add debt service payments for the 2019B, part of the debt offering. So once approved, it will increase the TCDA debt service budget by $295,000. And increase in appropriations will be funded by the reserve for future expenditures. The recommendation is approval of the resolution implementing the fourth quarter budget supplemental. And that is the end of the prepared remarks, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kang. Questions from staff? Pardon me, questions of staff from council? Or a motion? Actually, can't have a motion yet. Mr. Nolan, do we have any callers in the queue for the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, however scripted this may sound, there are no callers in the queue. I assure you that's not scripted.
Okay. Have I missed any other steps in the public hearing since I'm just making this up from memory? Staff, help me.
Staff questions? Are there any staff questions?
Yeah, well, I did ask that. I can ask it again. Are there any? Are you saying questions that staff have, or questions of staff?
Questions of staff, and if there aren't any, you could close the public hearing.
Okay. So, council, second opportunity to ask questions. Okay. I will close the public hearing. And is there a motion?
I move to approve TCDA resolution number 21-03.
I'm happy to second the motion.
All right, City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
TCDA resolution 21-03. A resolution to adopt the 2021 fourth quarter budget supplemental, including budget adjustments to Town Center Development Agency, Urban Development.
And a roll call vote.
Chair Snyder.
Yes.
Director Newton.
Yes.
Director Lube.
Yes.
Director Shaw.
Yes.
All right, TCDA resolution 21-03 is adopted unanimously by those present. And we will reconvene as the Tigard City Council for the remainder of the meeting. Next item on the agenda is item number 8, which is to receive an update on the city facilities consolidation project. City Manager Reimer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening again, Mayor and councilors, and my teammates that are on the call, as well as community members. Tonight, we wanted to give you a brief update on the consolidated facilities planning that we've been doing. As you know, just as my network is going bad. How is it on your end? You all right? Okay.
We can hear you. A little garbly, but not too bad.
Okay. Tonight, we want to provide an update on our facilities planning. And unlike January, when we got into a little more depth in a variety of topics, tonight's really meant to be a high-level overview, just to keep you and the community engaged in our process. As you know, we've been spending considerable time and resources evaluating what a new modern campus could be like for this community, something that's environmentally friendly, seismically sound, and provides adequate space for our teammates and our community members to conduct the business that we do. And so as part of this, we've been spending time in our due diligence looking at both a campus for a consolidated police, city hall, and parking structure, as well as a new home for our public works facility outside of the downtown, with the goal of all this to ensure that we have a very vibrant, active downtown that has additional housing in it, and that we're using our city-owned land, what we would say, in a much better way than we're using it today. And so with all of that, we've been spending time as a team. And I want to thank many of them for their efforts to date in ensuring that the due diligence that we're doing looks at a variety of options, a variety of different ways of potentially bringing a project like this together. One of the key things we've been working on as well since January is our community engagement. And since then, we have had 2 different online surveys. Teammates have met with boards and committees. I know the mayor and some of the councilors have been engaged in a variety of conversations as well at the state of the city, as well as social media updates. All of that is intended to improve and enhance the awareness and understanding of the community of what we're facing and why we're looking at this. And we're primarily looking at this because we have aged facilities, as you know. We've outgrown the facilities. A good example is our police department. For anyone that has had the opportunity to tour it or see the video, you understand that our police officers in the space that we have today just is not adequate to serve them or to serve our community. And so for all those reasons, we've been working on the planning efforts. And one of the things that we've discussed over the course of the last year or so is looking at a potential ballot measure in November of 2021. And one of the things we wanted to bring to your attention is we believe that due diligence, additional due planning or planning to do, as well as ensuring that we provide you and the community with additional information prior to asking for any potential ballot measure. Because of that, we are recommending this evening as well that we look at 2022 rather than 2021 as a potential ballot measure. And so one of our key next steps is to continuing our engagement with our community through our polling efforts. And Assistant City Manager Nyland is here to provide you and the community with an update on where we're at with that and where we're planning to go. And so with that, I will turn it over to Assistant City Manager Nyland at this point.
Good evening again. So thank you, Steve, for the introduction. As Steve mentioned, we are shifting the timeline, really focusing on making sure we do this project right instead of focusing on doing it right now. So with the change in timeline, instead of really concentrating on a November 2021 ballot measure, we've pushed it off to, our recommendation is pushing it off to 2022. Even though the timeline has changed, we are approaching the need for public opinion or surveys or polls in an urgent manner. We sent out, we had an RFP, five applications were received. After much conversation, we chose Patinkin Research Strategy, which is a small boutique firm that is very familiar with Tigard. We are going to be finalizing that contract this week and hope to, again, approach this really in an immediate nature. Launch a survey or a poll and get it in the field in June. Our plan is to do a second survey. The first survey is going to really focus on awareness and establishing a baseline. We'd like to do a second survey in late summer, early fall, and that would focus on messaging and really determining what resonates with the community. And what could move us to yes. And then we would follow up with a third survey, which would really solidify the findings that we found in survey 2, giving you guys the confidence you need to make a decision if you want to refer something in a future ballot. So again, high level, but we are operating this is urgent. So timeline and actions in immediate focus. So again, getting something out in the field in June. Questions?
Thank you, Assistant City Manager Nyland. Is that the conclusion of the staff report?
Just on the polling section.
On the polling section. Just some conclusion comments here is tonight, as we talked about, we want to make sure the council's up to date on what we're doing. One of the key things we're continuing to work on is a potential new site for Public Works. And so we would hope to be back to the council potentially in later June and with information and potentially a recommendation at that point, as well as the polling. And so because of the continued due diligence, as we've said a couple of times, we're looking for the council to confirm or affirm looking at 2022 as the potential for a community ballot measure. So with that, Mayor, I will turn it back to you and the councilors for any questions you may have of us.
All right, council questions or comments? Council President Lube.
I just want to acknowledge that I appreciate that we are sort of taking a step back and making sure that this is the right move and we're doing it in the right way. And so I support, targeting 2022 rather than targeting 2021. I think it's a smarter decision. It's too big of a decision to try to rush through and to do it correctly.
Councilor Newton.
Yeah, I would echo what Council President Lube said. Only comment I would have in addition is I think we can take the opportunity to educate and communicate with the public about the need as well. I mean, I think, there's some messaging we can do around where we find ourselves in terms of investing in, trying to keep our facilities in repair and just making sure people understand I guess I'll say what we're up against. And so I think that's important. And also as we're moving forward, to make sure that we're communicating with the community about services for them, you know, what's the need around providing them the best services we can. So, but I do support doing a more thorough research and the polling and going in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I too support the emphasis on due diligence and really the community engagement, and really excited by the idea of polling that'll further that community engagement. So also support 2022.
Thank you. Youth Councillor Calderon, anything you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, just to agree with the other councilors, I think it's a good idea to just take a step back, slow things down, not try to rush it. It's always better to do things right than have it be rejected by the voters. So I think this is a smart plan, and yeah.
I think from my perspective, we just got to a point where there wasn't enough specificity to be confident about what we were doing, and there also wasn't enough time to communicate what we need to communicate. And I think part of what we learned in the most recent public safety levy campaign was that engaging our community over a sustained period of time and a two-way dialogue was really powerful. And I think we're going to have to do that again on this front. So, and I certainly agree with the comment that it's more important to do it right than do it fast. And, you know, there's a general axiom that you can have things, you can have 2 out of the 3 of the following things: fast, good, and cheap. And you can get two of the 3 of those, but not all 3 at once. And so to me, this one's got to be done well, and it's got to be done as affordably as possible, which means it can't necessarily be done fast. And I just strongly believe that. So I'm supportive of the 2022 plan as well, and perhaps if what we learn indicates that 2022 isn't even the right time frame, I still believe it's more important to do it right than to do it fast. So that's my feedback. City Manager Reimer, do you think you have enough input and direction?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for all the comments and input that you provided.
All right. We have no non-agenda items. City Manager Reimer, administrative report.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. My Wi-Fi says it's going bad again, but if you can hear me, just you're fine. All right, we're still good. So if I start to talk is when it decides to tell me that. I was going to start by thanking John Goodrich for his efforts. All of you have made comments today, but from the entire team, I want to thank John for his efforts and for what he's meant. And so we appreciate it. We know he's done a lot of great things. We know he's going to enjoy the next adventure, which I think is the appropriate word for John in his life. So thanks for all your comments as well in that. Just a quick follow-up from our meeting last week during the council's training. We were talking about communications and council meetings. And as I've shared with you last week, I just wanted to also share again that we will make a goal of having an email to you by 2 o'clock on Tuesdays with any additional information like we did today. That'll come from our city recorder. And anytime that we have supplemental information or public comments or something else that we want to make sure the council has, one email will come to the council rather than potential multiple emails to try to streamline the communication. And we'll continue to strive for Tuesday or Wednesday morning packets to all of you. So as you conclude this meeting, you're ready to start reading your material for the next meeting. So those are just some follow-ups on some different events coming up. Is Let's Talk Transportation virtual event is tomorrow evening, in fact, from 5:30 to 7. So we'll have a variety of our teammates and managers there. Mayor, I believe you may be making some opening comments that evening, but it's really the chance to talk about all things transportation, which we know is a key part of our community, a key part of our long-term strategies of how we continue to be the type of community that Tigard strives to be. And so any and all input is appreciated by our community, and it'll just be an ongoing conversation that continues tomorrow night and into the future. We also have our Tigard on the Move speakers series, which is about the path the path to mobility equity, which is another great topic. And in this case, the Tiger Transportation Advisory Committee will be inviting the community to the virtual discussion on a panel of local experts, once again focused on transportation. The panels will be from the executive director of the Street Trust, of Oregon Walks, and of Street Smart. So another great opportunity for the community to engage in transportation conversations, and once again striving to make Tiger a planning project in the works right now between library and public works. We're looking at what we're calling library's backyard, and just looking at different options for use of the space behind the library, trying to activate it more for our community members. And so we're working on that today, and hopefully in the future we'll have some report backs to the council. We also have a public survey in regards to that, so we're trying to understand what the communities would like to see at our very active library, as all of you know. And just a great opportunity next to Family Creek Trail to find another way to engage and provide opportunities for our community to be active, to find nice places to read or to play, or just to enjoy the great outdoors. We've noticed many families have been spotted and joined the library story walk along Family Creek Trail as well, which is another cool program that we have going. The May book is called Call Me Tree by Maya Christina Gonzalez. And the Story Walk series was made possible by a resiliency grant from Washington County. So great partnership with the county, great partnership with the community, and just finding ways, once again, for them to be active and to be enjoying what we have to offer them. And finally, our summer reading program is about to kick off between June and August. And so that's a fun program for our residents as well. Also, the booth that we have at the farmers market on Sundays. We've been there for a few Sundays now. Thanks to some of you that have been there, and I know some of you will be joining us, the management team, as well as other teammates that have been there. Councilor Newton, I see your thumbs are up. But we've already had a chance to speak to over 250 people at those at the market. Just a great informal way, if you will, of the community engagement and just hearing what's on our community members' minds. And so we will continue that. Invite all of you, as well as other teammates from our organization, to join us there, and just have a chance to talk with our community members that are enjoying the farmers market. And last but not least, it has come to our attention that we have a new resident at Dirkskin Nature Park, and a pheasant has been spotted there. And so it's an exciting time for us. And so always, obviously, it's who we want to be and how we have engaged everyone in our community. But now we have a pheasant resident, and we hope for many more. And so with that concludes my remarks, and we will follow up on any and all comments that the council and the community has provided us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Reimer. I just want to acknowledge that tonight was probably our sloppiest technology meeting in quite some time. So, you know, for me throwing my mouse on the ground to all kinds of issues, sorry to the community, but we've been pretty good for a while, so it was bound to happen. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned. Good night, Tiger.
Good night, Tiger.
Good night, Tiger.
Have a good night.